Boy, I've had a day, I'll tell ya. Hello, I am Xarkun, and this is World of Warships Legends. Today, I'm taking something out of the backlog. Originally, I had planned to perhaps use this game in my Kansas review yesterday, but for reasons that I won't get into, I didn't use this game and I elected to go with another one. I'm showing you this one today on short notice because I needed something to put in a video. And, well, I worked all day today, and then when I got home, my ancient 2011 MacBook Pro simply would not boot up beyond the login screen. Spent several hours on the internet trying to figure out a solution for this before I ultimately gave up and wrote the ancient MacBook off as a loss. I mean, again, it was a 2011, so it's 10 years old. It's run for 10 years. I think it's done its job. I went out and I bought a much cheaper Windows PC that should get me by until I can afford something nicer. Hopefully, I can do a bit of an investment with any of the YouTube revenue I earn for, better technology to create even better videos for you guys. Anyway, enough about my personal troubles. Let's talk about this game. I wanted to show it to you guys at some point because some interesting things happen. And the first interesting thing has to do with this Odin out here. Now, as you can see, we've launched a salvo in his direction, and it is going to hit him. When it hits him, it strikes his citadel and does 21,000 damage. And you might be thinking to yourself, Xarkun, this is just a fluke, surely. German battleships with their turtleback are uniquely not vulnerable to taking citadel damage, at least at close range. And if you don't know why that is, it's because the shape of the armor around the citadel sorta makes a turtle shell looking shape, I guess, and there are slopes of the armor within the ship that are angled. If your shells hit those slopes, they should bounce off and not strike the citadel, at least at close range. Although at longer ranges, when the shells are coming down almost vertically and hitting the deck of the ship, then they don't hit that sloped side citadel armor. Instead, they just hit the top of the citadel armor scheme, and sometimes they can penetrate it and therefore enter the citadel and score citadel damage. So that may be what just happened with that shot on the Odin. And again, you might be thinking to yourself, this has to be a fluke. But really it isn't. We're going to get more citadels. There's 2 more, actually, on the Odin, and he's dead for the first blood medal. And this is not the only German battleship we're going to get a citadel on this game. And so I'm interested. Why is it that the Kansas is out here striking citadels on German battleships? Could it be something to do with the penetration of these guns? I don't know. And I'm curious to hear your guys' thoughts on it, which is why I wanted to show you this video in the first place. Next up, we're going to be facing a Scharnhorst, and you'll see the results we get on him. But first, there's a Vladivostok out there, and we should take note of what's happening in this game, which is not good things for my team, okay? The enemy has 3 caps. They've got Alpha and Charlie. Of course, they started with Delta, so they've got 3 caps, and we've only got the one we spawned with. This is going to eventually translate into a huge points lead for them. They actually have a points lead right now, but if all things were equal, in that we had the same number of caps, we would have a points lead because I sunk that Odin and a destroyer got sunk on my team. Now, battleships are worth more lump sum points when they get sunk than destroyers are. So, if we were in equal circumstances with caps, we would have more points. As it stands, the enemy does. But here's that Scharnhorst I was talking about, giving broadside just like the Odin, a little further away, in fact, than the Odin initially was. And what? Another citadel. What is going on? That is what I want to know. We have done 4 citadels this game on German battleships. If anybody can explain this to me, I'd love to hear in the comments. That Scharnhorst, like the Odin earlier, was pretty far away. At that point, he was 15 kilometers away from us when we took the shot, and I think the Odin was roughly 13 or 14. So it could just be plunging fire going through the deck and hitting the citadel. But, you know, initially I thought it was a fluke on the Odin, but when it happened again on the Scharnhorst, I'm starting to wonder if the Kansas is somehow uniquely tuned to citadel German battleships at long range. But I suppose we can't continue wondering about that for too long because our team is now in trouble. We've lost 3 ships, the enemy has lost 3 ships as well, and you might say, okay, well, that's not that bad of a situation, but there goes another friendly battleship, and again, the enemy continues to maintain control of 2 caps. We've got our teammates in the Alpha cap contesting that. That's good. It means that the enemy is not going to be able to acquire points from holding that cap, but they still comfortably hold both Delta and Charlie, and now that Scharnhorst that we just citadeled has gotten into Bravo, which means my team's income of points has now been reduced to 0, and this is a big problem. The game is almost halfway over, and the enemy is leading us almost double our points, or at least 300 more points than we have. Unfortunately, the Scharnhorst goes dark. I would like to be able to reset him, but I can't really do that if I can't see him. There is, however, a Fletcher in front of me, and there is also one other enemy destroyer left. These 2 are going to be the biggest problems, and as I always say, if you see a destroyer and can shoot at it, you should definitely do that. Rule number 1 of battleships. If destroyers are the biggest threat to you, which I suppose they are, then you can't rely on your teammates to save you from the threat that destroyers present to you. Sometimes you gotta take the responsibility for your own ship into your own hands, and you do that whenever you see destroyers. Unfortunately, the results on that particular Fletcher weren't great. On the bright side, however, it does look like one of my remaining battleship teammates is in Alpha, and he may actually be capturing it, although perhaps not. I can't quite tell if the blue progress bar around the cap circle is going up, or if it's stalled because he's being contested. Meanwhile, the only surviving destroyer we have on our team is right next to me, which is not necessarily the best place for him to go, and it looks like he is going after that Scharnhorst. I'd prefer he tried to spot the Fletcher or the other enemy destroyer, but then again, when he has so few hit points as he does, can you really blame him for going out there and trying to torpedo some battleships? I suppose I can't. Scharnhorst and I think a Georgia are now firing at me. I might be giving a little bit too much broadside to the Georgia, but I am trying to take down this Scharnhorst, and you can see that these AP shells, when they hit his superstructure and turrets, they are quite effective. The Kansas is really a powerful ship with hard-hitting guns, and that's the main reason I like it. But even though these guns are hard-hitting, and even though this ship may be quite powerful, we're not exactly in a healthy situation in terms of winning the game. I don't know what happened in the Alpha Cap, but that battleship that was trying to cap it is no longer trying to do so. Perhaps a destroyer chased him out. And now I'm running into a Roma as the Georgia rounds the corner flat broadside. Unfortunately, RNG is not kind to us with that salvo. While it could have been a Citadel, it was not. And that may be something to do with the commander build I'm running. It's the one I showed you yesterday in my Georgia review, but because I'm such a professional, I was not actually using that commander build in the game I showed you. Instead, I was using Sims. This build is Willis Lee, and aside from the really wonky shots like that, where the dispersion is all over the place, I think you'll note, if you've been paying attention, that the accuracy on this ship, with nothing actually working to buff the accuracy aside from the artillery plotting room mod in the 4th slot. Even with nothing except that mod, the accuracy is what you would call fairly acceptable. Now though, 4 versus 4, enemy has control of all the caps. Unless we start sinking some ships really soon, then we're going to be in trouble. Now I've chambered the HE. It is 11 seconds away from being reloaded. Why have I done this? Because I know there are 2 destroyers right in front of me, and now is not the time to try to kite away or avoid their torpedoes by sailing in the opposite direction. Instead, we've got to charge in here because the enemy is at 936 points, and the only way we're going to stop them from winning imminently is by sinking some ships. So here are some torpedoes, but since I'm charging toward these destroyers, I only take 1. It barely does any damage whatsoever. I'm not sure what the destroyer is, but Yudachi out there, he gets spotted. We don't want to take his torpedoes. So the HE salvo is out. The Yudachi is down. That gives us a temporary reprieve on points. And here is the Fletcher right up next. Double strike. There goes both destroyers. That just leaves the Georgia and the aircraft carrier. Now, this game might potentially be winnable in different circumstances. As it stands, though, there are only 3 minutes left, and the enemy's at 910 points. They would have won already had we not sunk those 2 destroyers, but this is just giving us a little bit of an extra chance to try to sink the Georgia, which, as he goes behind that island, we realize, quite unfortunately, that we're not going to be able to do. Some games are just unwinnable, like, you know, battling with your 2011 MacBook Pro to get it to log back in and staring at the white screen of death for 2 hours. Sorta how I suppose I felt after this game was over. That same way as I felt trying to resuscitate my MacBook. Nevertheless, I think there are some really interesting things in here. The double strike at the end was particularly nice, but the citadels on the German battleships. If any of you have the Kansas, let me know if you've actually been able to score citadels on German battleships with it, and if it's something that has happened relatively consistently for you. I'm not going to say it has for me, because I can't recall how many times I've shot at German battleships with this particular battleship, but still, interesting. Hope you enjoyed the video. If so, give it a thumbs up. Thank you so much for watching. Consider subscribing if you haven't already, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.